So on to the almost final point in the day before the reception. And of course, we understand that we are almost the last hurdle between you and having a stretch and having some fresh air. So I will just lower your anxiety by saying that we have agreed that we probably won't take up half an hour, so we can manage with a bit less time. But I do not mean that as a criticism to the previous panel, because Estonia has really been happy to welcome both of these events to our country, and we have benefited greatly. So I think it's wonderful to have them highlighted here in such a fashion. But our topic now is the 25th anniversary declaration that you might remember from this morning's comments from Sarah. And we're going to talk about what it is, and you can follow along. And if there's anyone still online with us, this is the interactive part, because everyone can contribute. And as was already mentioned earlier, we're going to circle back to this tomorrow as well. Now, the setup, I am Pille from Estonia, and I will be doing a fair amount of mediating right now, because I am the representative of a member state here, and thus beginning this presentation. The slides have been put together by Richard, whom I will hand you over to in a little while, and the declaration draft itself has been put together by David Newby, or as he styled himself, the scribe of this text, which I think is a wonderful term. So there is a lot of filtering going on, because at the back of the draft document are a number of sources that David has drawn from. The thematic areas that you saw in Susanna's presentation earlier, Council of Europe publications, even the contributions to the anniversary publication that you all have with you as well. But before we get really started, in your bags you will find the draft declaration, both in English and in French, and you are really welcome to follow along and get immersed in it and return to it later today, early tomorrow, and until we are still all here. So this is the short overview of what we have planned for you, to briefly cover the background to and the reason for the declaration, and to then talk about the 9 cornerstones which summarize the principles and practice of the center's work. I hear a lot of rustling, so I hope everyone has been able to, or is successfully locating the documents. Yes. And then we will, in the end, add another topic here, the point about your feedback. The purpose of the declaration was actually alluded to earlier as well, or actually quite explicitly spoken about. It is to raise awareness of the political importance of language education, and then to address the needs that have arisen in different contexts in Europe. There were wonderful ideas in the morning sessions about how language education and knowledge of languages is at the core of many aspects of our lives, including the 5 Ds mentioned by the Director General. But it seems to me that sometimes, at least, or every now and then, the relevance of languages tends to get lost among other things. We sometimes say that languages are so horizontal as a topic that they tend to disappear behind the horizon, that they just drop off. And we all assume that they're very important, and yes, everyone should be working on them, but for some reason there are other topics that emerge as greater emergencies, and we need to remind ourselves of the importance of languages every now and then. And today is a wonderful reason to do this. And now, the key introductory points that we draw from the draft itself are thus, and there are 3. The first one being that at the backdrop of everything that the center does is the idea that we value everyone who works with languages and language education, and to try to work with their professionalization and to do this in an innovative way and to offer them opportunities for development. And I think this is it was nicely illustrated or drawn out by Susanna, who spoke about the diversification of the center's activities, including the target groups that have become more and more involved. There's also the understanding that the center's vision for language education is inclusive, it's plurilingual, and it's intercultural. And I think the idea surrounding what labels we can use for different languages is one indicator of it, how immersed and integrated all of it is. There's also the need for pedagogical approaches that would vary according to learner needs and specific contexts. I think Sarah discussed this briefly, and I think the projects that are conducted in cooperation with the EU are a good example of this, and I know this from the experience of having both of these training events in Estonia as well. But this is the idea behind the declaration, that it's a good time to take stock, as you said earlier, after 25 years, and to look both backwards and forwards, and to think about what it is that the center can bring with it and further develop. So the cornerstones, which are really the main bulk of the declaration text, are familiar for you as well. You saw them earlier, and if you are among the 13 million visitations to the ECML website 2 years ago, then you might remember those colored areas or markers from there as well. So we will just walk you through them, and you can follow along on this page. I hope you have all found it. We're going to move from right to left, and me showing this side then. And we're just going to comment quickly. They're not word for word from the declaration. They are a rephrasing of it, so maybe it will help you draw in some other points of emphasis, or maybe it will draw your attention to some things that you would wish were different. And this is completely up to you to suggest, because as I said, it is a draft. Okay, so the first one, and although they are numbered for the sake of clarity, this is no indicator of any hierarchies or preferences, they are equal. But number one, for the sake of clarity, is teacher and learner competences. So one of the cornerstones for the center is definitely to work with the competences that both teachers and learners need, and these are varied, so not just linguistic, but communicative, cultural, and plurilingual. And it means that everyone involved in this process are aware that we need to participate actively. And I really like the idea from the morning session that we shouldn't always tell the students what they need on the labor market, because they're not just the labor force. They are something more. And I think this also approaches this idea very nicely, so that they would have everything that they need to make positive contributions in societies that are culturally so diverse, and so that they would feel just a bit less afraid. I think this is often the source of a lot of the problems that we are having. The second one, plurilingual and intercultural education, has also been mentioned in one way or another today quite a bit. So we do need to stress the relationship between language education and educating students and people in general to become democratic citizens, so that they would be able to respect others, to respond positively to cultural diversity, and to really be able and open to mutual understanding and tolerance. And this idea as well was mentioned already to do all of this to help them, so as to help them develop their personal language repertoires, which means precisely that they would feel that all of their languages, no matter if it's still called the mother tongue, first tongue, foreign, whatever the label, that all of this has a place in what they do, and it is all a resource, that nothing should be hidden in terms of the language abilities that we have and the language knowledge that we bring to classrooms or other contexts. Early language learning. Certainly among one of the topics that was there way back when, as you saw from the very nice and quick historical walk through the center's previous activities. So still to offer support and training that would focus on making sure that from a very early age we get experience in learning languages, that it will set us up to be open and tolerant, and we will welcome other languages, other cultures into our lives. And to ensure that these approaches again encourage positive attitudes towards anyone who maybe isn't from the same cultural group that we are from. And pushing onwards, CLIL, ever present. I know certainly that it is a term or a topic that comes with a lot of different definitions, different labels, different understandings. But the ideas here being that we need to help teachers to develop their literacy in very many ways across the boundaries of subject teaching. And this, I know, is certainly something that we need to work on as well. And I know that this is the case in many countries, that it's still somehow compartmentalized and it's not approached from this cross-subject boundary or approach. And the idea behind it, again, is to develop learners' autonomy, their analytical and critical thinking skills, that they would integrate all of the elements that they are given in their education in general. I will now hand you over to Richard.
Thank you very much, Pille. Good afternoon, everybody. So, as you've already been seeing, there is a mixture of different cornerstones here. Some of them are, if you like, transversal, such as competencies. Some are more focused, such as sign language or CLIL. So I'm going on to the fifth cornerstone of this nonagon. I've lived a long time not being able to say nonagon, but now I can. Nine-sided polygon. Sign languages, as you've seen, all through the day, and as you know from previous presentations, have become an important and, if you like, equal focus for the work of both the ECML and the Council of Europe by, for example, adding CFR reference levels for sign language to the companion volume of the Common European Framework. It's important that the attention to language and language competencies and teacher competencies be extended to sign language so that the teachers and learners who depend on sign language have that opportunity as well to benefit from ECML resources and Council of Europe resources. Moving on then to the next one. Here's another cross-cutting one. Evaluation and assessment cuts across all the work on languages that the Council of Europe and the ECML have been involved in. And here we are particularly concerned with both evaluation, as you might call it, which is the more formal aspect of it, summative evaluation, for example, at the end of a course, in order to progress to another level and so on, ensuring by means of supporting testers, evaluators, familiarity with the standards and descriptors of the Common European Framework, that there is greater validity and greater reliability in summative testing in that kind of evaluation, whoever is doing it. On the other hand, and equally important, is what we might call assessment, if you like, continuous assessment, which is formative, which is carried out perhaps by teachers on a regular basis, possibly on a daily basis, but also by learners themselves when they are involved in self-assessment, for example, using one or other of the European language portfolios. And as you know, there is a whole web area in the Council of Europe website dedicated to the ELP. And this is one further means of enhancing learners' independence, autonomy, and increasing their awareness. An area that's been mentioned quite often today, and indeed in the last presentation, is migrant education and employment, something that I personally have been involved in, along with other experts, with the Council of Europe LIAM project. And here, the importance is, as has been pointed out already, that migrants need to feel valued. It's not just a question of adaptation and integration. It's a question of feeling that they are equal participants in their new home society. And in order to do that, there needs to be a two-way process. Integration is a two-way process, is a famous phrase that was echoing round the working parties are working on the LIAM project. And part of that is making sure that migrants feel that they are positively viewed and that their languages and cultures are positively viewed, as was exemplified in the examples given in the previous presentation. But also there is this importance of making an effort to safeguard, not to simply disregard and not to override migrants' own languages. And this goes as much for child migrants, for children coming into schools, as to adult migrants. It's a key issue in integration. Although from a migrant's perspective, particularly a refugee who's arriving new, language is maybe a little way down their list of priorities. Other priorities, including bureaucratic ones, health-related ones, housing, and all sorts of other issues, come to the fore. But as has been pointed out so many times today, language is an essential tool in life as well as in society. Language of schooling has been mentioned several times today, and this is another of the ECML's cornerstones, as you've heard, supporting the development, the ongoing development of the language of schooling among all students, not just students for whom the language of schooling is a foreign language, but all students, is a critical aspect of ECML's work. And much has been written and said about how crucial the language of schooling is to progress that students can make, not only in their education, but in life, and indeed in their participation in democratic societies. So encouraging a positive school-wide approach, not just to the language of schooling, but to other languages that work alongside the language of schooling and the cultures that exist in classrooms, is a very important issue for schools, particularly for school-wide. And I like the emphasis that was given to school-wide awareness raising of the importance of students' languages and cultural repertoires. This is the last one, and you won't be surprised that it touches on new media, ICT, and particularly the ability to use those media and those new, relatively new, they're called new, but they're no longer so new, opportunities to further learning, both from the point of view of teaching and from the point of view of learners' work in the classroom, making sure that learners, with the support of teachers, develop their digital literacy alongside their language-based literacy, is positive, is inquiry-based, is experiential, and leads them to be able to take advantage of that in their learning and in life in general. So that brings us to the end of the last cornerstone of the nonagon, and it's a very rich, it looks as if it's scattered here, but of course each of these cornerstones, as in a building, are part of an important structure, interlinked, interdependent in a way, and they, if you like, form the basis of what ECML has been trying to do for 25 years and continues to try to do. Our last point, am I saying this? Our last point is that this, as Pille has said, is a draft declaration. It's not the finished article. The idea is that by the end of tomorrow and after that, there will be a declaration in place which, if you like, the ECML, its experts, all who work with it, can sign up to, can believe in, can say, yeah, that reflects our understanding of priorities. So we do need your feedback. We need your feedback whether you are sitting here with us in the hall or whether you are watching us, listening to us online. Please do try to contribute to this in whatever way you want, by suggestions, suggested improvements to any part of the document. You can see there that there is a deadline because we'd like to give some initial response or report on the feedback tomorrow afternoon, midday tomorrow, Central European time, depending on where you're living. And there are two questions. One is, what changes, if any, do you think should be made to the draft declaration? And that could be content changes, style changes, length changes, additions, and so on. Secondly, how might this declaration be of use in your own context? How could it be used? How would you use it, especially if you are representing in some way ECML? How can it be used, if you like, to further the work that ECML is doing? Down there, there is a link which you can use to send in your feedback. So please copy down that link now. I don't think it's anywhere in your papers, so please copy it down on your phone or however you want to do it so that you can send us feedback when you wish, but before 12 o'clock tomorrow. Okay, shall we finish there? All right, we'll finish there. Thank you very much.